The morning hustle outside the Chicago Federal Courthouse was nothing out of the ordinary. Black sedans with tinted windows pulling up to the curb, journalists setting up their equipment on the sidewalk, and police officers establishing security perimeters around the building. At the center of it all, Judge Richard Harrington, the most powerful federal judge in the Northern District of Illinois, was preparing to preside over one of the most sensitive hearings of his career. The case involved North Star Pharmaceuticals, a multi-billion-dollar corporation whose practices had recently come under scrutiny, and the stakes were astronomical. Politicians, business leaders, and media outlets were all watching closely, but Judge Harrington, known for his unwavering stance and aversion to external pressures, showed no signs of concern. His reputation for fairness and strict adherence to the law had earned him both admirers and enemies throughout his 20-year career on the bench. Today would test that reputation once again. Dressed in a conservative charcoal suit, his silver hair perfectly combed, and surrounded by security personnel and clerks, he walked with determined steps across the plaza toward the courthouse entrance. The early summer air was warm, but a gentle breeze made the morning pleasant. Judge Harrington acknowledged the greetings from courthouse staff with subtle nods as he moved through the crowd. That's when it happened. A small figure burst through the sea of suits and uniforms. A girl, appearing no older than 8 or 9, dirty-faced and wearing tattered clothes, emerged between parked cars and ran directly toward him. The security detail moved forward immediately, hands reaching inside their jackets, but they were too slow to prevent her from shouting in a trembling, desperate voice, "Don't go in there, Judge. They're gonna poison you." The impact was immediate. Photographers swiveled their cameras, passers-by stopped in their tracks, and murmurs rippled through the crowd. Judge Harrington froze for a moment. He looked at the girl with astonishment, and for a brief instant something flickered across his otherwise stoic face, a hint of recognition, perhaps, or concern. Then, just as quickly, he regained his composure, signaling to everyone that everything was under control. "It's all right," he said calmly to his security team, who had already moved to intercept the child. One of the guards, a burly man named Frank, gently but firmly took hold of the girl's arm. "Come on, kid, you can't be here," he said, pulling her away. "Street hallucination," someone in the crowd muttered. "Poor kid's probably on something," another voice added dismissively. But the girl's words echoed in Judge Harrington's mind as he continued his walk into the building. Poisoning. The word wasn't random. It wasn't common in the vocabulary of a child living on the streets. Still, he chose to ignore it. He entered the building as he did every day, maintained his firm tone in preliminary meetings, and prepared to open the session. In his chambers, his clerk, Melissa Warren, was organizing the day's files. "Everything okay, Your Honor?" she asked, noticing his slightly distracted demeanor. "Yes, just an unusual encounter outside," he replied, straightening his tie. "Nothing to worry about." Melissa nodded, but she knew Judge Harrington well enough to sense when something was bothering him. After 7 years as his clerk, she could read the subtle shifts in his mood. "The North Star case files are ready," she said, changing the subject. "The defense has submitted last-minute evidence they want to introduce. I've flagged the problematic sections." "They're grasping at straws," Judge Harrington said, his focus returning to the case at hand. "North Star knows they're cornered. Jonathan Sterling won't go down without a fight, though." Jonathan Sterling, the CEO of North Star Pharmaceuticals, was a fixture in Chicago's business elite, charismatic, ruthless, and politically connected. The allegations against his company involved patent infringement and potentially harmful side effects of their latest blockbuster drug that had been concealed from the FDA. If the case went against them, billions in revenue and Sterling's carefully crafted reputation would crumble. The judge knew the stakes. He had faced corporate pressure before, but something about this case felt different, more personal, more dangerous. Maybe that's why the girl's warning had disturbed him more than he cared to admit. The preliminary hearing began at 10 a.m. sharp. The courtroom was packed with attorneys, corporate representatives, media, and curious onlookers. Judge Harrington entered with his characteristic commanding presence, his black robe flowing behind him as he took his seat at the bench. "All rise," The United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois is now in session. The Honorable Judge Richard Harrington presiding, announced the bailiff. "Be seated," Judge Harrington said, his voice firm and clear. He looked out at the gallery, noting Jonathan Sterling's presence in the front row behind his team of high-priced attorneys. Sterling met his gaze with cold confidence, a slight smile playing at the corners of his mouth. The judge felt an inexplicable chill. For 2 hours, the proceedings continued without incident. The legal teams presented their initial arguments, motions were filed and contested, and Judge Harrington maintained strict control over his courtroom. When he called for a recess at noon, everything seemed to be progressing as expected. He returned to his chambers, loosened his collar, and sat at his desk. His administrative assistant, Patricia, brought in a bottle of water and a light lunch, a turkey sandwich and an apple. "Thank you, Patricia," he said, taking a sip of water. "Any messages?" "Nothing urgent, Your Honor," she replied. "Your wife called to remind you about dinner with the Mitchells tonight." He nodded, and Patricia left the room. Judge Harrington opened the sandwich container and was about to take a bite when he noticed the hand sanitizer on his desk. It was a new bottle, replacing the one that had run out yesterday. Standard courthouse procedure, especially since the pandemic had heightened everyone's awareness of hygiene. He squeezed a dollop onto his palm, rubbed his hands together, and continued with his lunch. 20 minutes later, as he prepared to return to the courtroom, something happened. It wasn't dramatic, no sudden collapse, no cry of pain. It was subtle, a feeling of discomfort, dizziness, dry mouth, cold sweat. He sat down, feeling suddenly unsteady. "Melissa," he called out, his voice weaker than intended. His clerk appeared in the doorway. "Could you get me another water?" "Of course, Your Honor," she replied, but then paused, noticing his pallor and the slight tremor in his hands. "Are you feeling all right?" "Just a bit lightheaded," he admitted. "Probably nothing." But within minutes, the situation worsened. The dizziness intensified, and nausea swept over him in waves. Melissa noticed the change immediately and called for help. Within moments, Patricia was on the phone with emergency services, while the courthouse security chief entered the chambers. "Judge Harrington, the paramedics are on their way," the security chief said, kneeling beside the judge, who had now slumped in his chair. "Can you tell us what you're feeling?" "Can't focus," Judge Harrington managed to say. "Numbness in my fingers." His mind, still sharp despite his physical distress, flashed back to the girl's warning from earlier that morning. "Don't go in there, Judge, they're going to poison you." The words now seemed prophetic rather than nonsensical. As his consciousness began to fade, one thought crystallized in his mind. The girl knew. Somehow that child knew what was going to happen to him, and he had ignored her. The last thing he remembered before the paramedics arrived was Melissa's worried face hovering over him and the distant sound of Patricia's voice. "Yes, we believe Judge Harrington has been poisoned. Please hurry." The scene at Northwestern Memorial Hospital was one of controlled chaos. The ambulance had arrived with sirens blaring, and Judge Harrington was immediately rushed through the emergency department doors on a gurney, surrounded by paramedics rattling off vital signs and symptoms to the waiting medical team. News of the judge's collapse spread quickly through Chicago's legal circles, and within an hour, the hospital's reception area was filled with courthouse staff, fellow judges, and reporters hungry for information. Elizabeth Harrington, the judge's wife, of 30 years, arrived breathless and wide-eyed, having been pulled from her university lecture when she received the call. A tall, elegant woman with auburn hair streaked with gray, she commanded attention as she strode toward the information desk. "I'm here for Richard Harrington," she said, her voice steady despite her obvious distress. "I'm his wife." A nurse quickly escorted her to a private waiting area, where Melissa, the judge's clerk, was already seated, still in shock from the events of the afternoon. "Elizabeth," Melissa said, rising to embrace her. "They're running tests now. They think it might be poisoning." Elizabeth's face paled. "Poisoning? That's impossible. Who would—" She stopped mid-sentence, the implications suddenly washing over her. Her husband had enemies, of course. Any federal judge did. But this was something else entirely. This was attempted murder. Dr. Anita Sharma, the attending physician, entered the waiting room an hour later. Her expression was serious, but not grim, which Elizabeth took as a positive sign. "Mrs. Harrington," Dr. Sharma began, "your husband is stable now. We've identified traces of a synthetic compound in his system that appears to be a derivative of organophosphates, chemicals commonly found in certain pesticides but highly concentrated in this case. Will he recover?" Elizabeth asked, gripping Melissa's hand. "We believe so. We've administered the appropriate antidote and he's responding well. He's conscious now, though very weak. The next 24 hours will be critical, but barring any complications, he should make a full recovery." Elizabeth let out a breath she hadn't realized she was holding. "Can I see him?" Dr. Sharma nodded, briefly. "And there are 2 detectives waiting to speak with both of you, if he's up to it." The hospital room was quiet, except for the steady beeping of monitors. Judge Harrington lay in the bed, his normally commanding presence diminished by the hospital gown and IV lines. His face was ashen, but his eyes were alert when Elizabeth entered. "Lizzie," he said, his voice hoarse. "I'm okay." She took his hand, careful of the IV. "You scared me to death, Richard." "Ironic choice of words," he said, attempting a weak smile. "Considering someone just tried to—" "Don't," she interrupted. "Don't even say it." She sat on the edge of the bed. "The police are here. They want to talk to you." Judge Harrington nodded. "I know who did this, Lizzie." "What? Who?" "Not who exactly," he clarified, "but I know it's connected to the North Star case. It has to be. And there's something else." He hesitated, then continued. "This morning, outside the courthouse, a little girl, a homeless child, she ran up to me. She warned me not to go into the courthouse. She said someone was going to poison me." Elizabeth stared at him in disbelief. "A child? How could she possibly know?" "That's what I need to find out," he said, squeezing her hand with what little strength he had. The detectives entered after a short knock. Detective Marcus Rivera was a veteran of the Chicago PD with 20 years of experience in the Major Crimes Division. His partner, Detective Sophia Chen, was younger but equally sharp. They introduced themselves and expressed their concern for the judge's well-being before beginning their questions. "Judge Harrington," Detective Rivera began, "we understand this may have been a targeted attack. Can you think of anyone who might want to harm you?" Judge Harrington exchanged a glance with his wife before answering. "I'm currently presiding over a major case involving North Star Pharmaceuticals. The stakes are extremely high. Billions in potential damages, possible criminal charges for executives, not to mention their stock value." Detective Chen made notes. "Any specific threats related to this case?" "Nothing explicit," the judge replied. "But Jonathan Sterling, their CEO, has a reputation for playing hardball, and there's something else you should know." He proceeded to tell them about the girl's warning. Both detectives looked skeptical but intrigued. "A street kid knew about the poisoning before it happened," Detective Rivera said, raising an eyebrow. "That's unusual." "Find her," Judge Harrington said firmly. "She's a key witness. She either overheard something or saw something. She knows more than she should." "We'll look into it," Detective Chen promised. "In the meantime, we've already requested the courthouse security footage and initiated an investigation into anyone who had access to your chambers today." After the detectives left, Judge Harrington turned to his wife. "I need to speak with Melissa," he said. "There's something not right about this whole situation." When Melissa entered, her relief at seeing the judge conscious was evident on her face. "Your Honor, I'm so glad you're recovering." "Melissa," he said, gesturing for her to come closer. "The hand sanitizer on my desk, it was new today, wasn't it?" She thought for a moment. "Yes, the cleaning staff replaced it this morning, as they do every week." "Who's responsible for the cleaning supplies?" "That would be the facilities. Management department. They contract with Apex Cleaning Services." Judge Harrington nodded slowly. "I need you to check something for me discreetly. Find out if anyone unusual was seen near my chambers this morning. Someone who doesn't belong." Melissa understood immediately. "I'll contact security right away." Back at the courthouse, an internal investigation was already underway. The chief judge had ordered a full security review, and the FBI had been notified of a potential attack on a federal judge. court security officers were reviewing footage from every camera in the building. What they found confirmed Judge Harrington's suspicions. The security cameras revealed a maintenance worker wearing an Apex Cleaning Services uniform entering the restricted area leading to the judge's chambers early that morning. The man wasn't recognized by regular courthouse staff, and when cross-checked with Apex's employee records, no match was found. He had disappeared after the judge was taken to the hospital, leaving no trace of his real identity. The hand sanitizer bottle from the judge's desk was collected as evidence and rushed to the FBI laboratory for analysis. The results came back quickly. The sanitizer had been laced with a concentrated organophosphate compound, the same poison found in the judge's system. The method was clever. The poison could be absorbed through the skin, making it an effective delivery system that wouldn't be immediately suspected. Meanwhile, Detective Chen had begun the search for the mysterious girl who had warned the judge. She visited homeless shelters, community centers, and areas known to be frequented by street kids, showing a rough description of the girl based on witness accounts from outside the courthouse. For days, the search yielded nothing. The girl seemed to have vanished into Chicago's vast urban landscape. At the hospital, Judge Harrington was making a steady recovery. By the third day, he was sitting up in bed, reviewing case files that Melissa had brought him despite Elizabeth's protests that he should be resting. The North Star hearing has been temporarily reassigned to Judge Matthews, Melissa informed him. Jonathan Sterling made a public statement expressing shock and concern over your health emergency, as he called it. Judge Harrington's expression darkened. I bet he did. What else? The FBI has taken over the investigation. They've identified the sanitizer as the source of the poison. They're treating this as an attempted assassination of a federal judge. The gravity of the situation hung in the air between them. Judge Harrington had faced threats before, angry letters, occasional protests outside the courthouse, but never anything like this. For the first time in his career, he felt vulnerable within the very system he had sworn to uphold. What about the girl? He asked. Any sign of her? Melissa shook her head. Detective Chen has been searching, but so far nothing. It's like she disappeared. Judge Harrington frowned. She's the key to all of this, Melissa. She knew. Somehow she knew what was going to happen. We need to find her before they do. They? Whoever is behind this, he clarified. If she witnessed something or overheard plans being discussed, she's in danger. A child living on the streets wouldn't be hard to silence. The thought sent a chill through him. An innocent child already vulnerable due to her circumstances, now potentially targeted because she had tried to help him. The irony wasn't lost on him. He, a federal judge with all the power and protection of the US government behind him, had survived while she remained exposed and hunted. On the fifth day, Judge Harrington was discharged from the hospital with instructions to rest at home. The FBI had assigned agents to protect him and his wife, transforming their peaceful Lincoln Park home into something resembling a fortress. Elizabeth tried to maintain a sense of normalcy, but the presence of armed agents outside their door made that nearly impossible. You need to step back from this case, Richard, she urged as they sat in their living room that evening. Let Judge Matthews handle it. Your health is fine, he interrupted, and I can't step back, not now. If I do, they win. Is that what matters to you? Winning? Her voice was tinged with frustration and fear. No, he said more gently. Justice matters, and finding that girl matters. She saved my life, Lizzie. I owe her. Elizabeth couldn't argue with that. Instead, she asked, What are you going to do? Judge Harrington looked out the window at the agent standing on their front lawn, then back at his wife. Something I should have done the moment she warned me. I'm going to listen. The next morning, against medical advice and Elizabeth's protests, Judge Harrington made a decision that would change the course of the investigation and his own life. He called Detective Chen. I need your help with something unofficial, he told her. No FBI, no courthouse security, just you and me. What exactly are you proposing, Judge? She asked cautiously. I need to find that girl, Detective, and I think I know how to do it. His plan was unusual but straightforward. He would go to where she might be hiding, not as Judge Richard Harrington of the federal court, but as just another person willing to listen. To do that, he would need to disappear from the watchful eyes of his protection detail, just for a few hours. And he would need someone who knew the streets of Chicago better than any FBI agent. He would need Detective Sophia Chen. The plan was set in motion the following afternoon. Judge Harrington told his FBI detail that he would be resting in his study for several hours and didn't wish to be disturbed. Elizabeth, though reluctant, agreed to cover for him if anyone asked. Meanwhile, Detective Chen waited in an unmarked car 2 blocks away, having entered the neighborhood from the opposite direction to avoid notice. The judge slipped out through the garden door that led to the alley behind, their property, wearing jeans, a plain navy sweatshirt, and a Chicago Cubs cap, a far cry from his usual tailored suits and commanding presence. He walked quickly, head down, until he reached Detective Chen's car. "You know this is insane, right?" Chen said as he climbed into the passenger seat. "If anyone finds out I'm helping a federal judge dodge his protective detail, my career is over." "No one will find out," he assured her. "And this isn't just about finding a witness. This is about protecting a child who tried to protect me." Chen nodded, putting the car in drive. "I've been thinking about where to start. Based on witness descriptions and the courthouse location, our best bet is Lower Wacker Drive. There's a community of homeless people there, including some families with children." As they drove through Chicago's streets, Judge Harrington was struck by how different the city looked from this perspective. Not from his elevated courtroom bench or the windows of his Lincoln Park home, but from ground level, where real people lived real lives, often in desperate circumstances. Lower Wacker Drive was a world unto itself. The multi-level street system created a shadowy underbelly beneath the gleaming skyscrapers above. Here in the dim light and concrete echo chamber, dozens of people had created makeshift homes from tarps, cardboard, and whatever else they could salvage. Chen parked at a distance, and they approached on foot. "Let me do the talking," she advised. "These people don't trust authority figures, and right now that includes both of us." Judge Harrington agreed, staying slightly behind her as they approached a group gathered around a small fire in a metal drum. Chen showed her badge, but kept her tone casual. "I'm looking for information about a girl, about 8 years old, who was near the federal courthouse 5 days ago. Small, thin, dirty blonde hair. Anyone seen her?" The group exchanged glances but remained silent. Chen sighed and pulled out some cash. "I'm not here to cause trouble. The girl's not in any trouble either. We just need to talk to her. It's important." An older man with a weathered face and a gray beard finally spoke up. "I ain't seen no girl like that. Kids come and go. They don't stay in one place too long, especially not alone." "She might not be alone," Judge Harrington said, stepping forward despite Chen's warning glance. "She might be with someone, a parent, a guardian, anyone." The man eyed him suspiciously. "You don't look like a cop." "I'm not," Judge Harrington replied honestly. "I'm just someone who owes her a debt." A woman sitting nearby, wrapped in several layers of clothing despite the summer heat, looked up. "You the one she warned? The judge?" Judge Harrington's heart raced. "Yes, did you know her?" The woman shrugged. "Not really. Saw her around sometimes. She was quiet, watched everything. Smart kid. Do you know where she might be now?" The woman hesitated, then pointed down the tunnel. "There's a woman named Grace who takes in kids sometimes. Unofficially, you know. She might know something." Chen thanked her, leaving the cash, and they continued deeper into the labyrinth beneath the city. Grace's place turned out to be a relatively organized section of the underbelly, with plastic sheeting creating walls and old furniture arranged to form something resembling rooms. A stern-looking black woman in her 60s sat in a threadbare armchair like it was a throne. "Grace?" Chen asked. The woman nodded once, her eyes sharp and assessing. "Police," she stated rather than asked, looking at Chen. Then her gaze shifted to Judge Harrington. "And you're no cop. Who are you people, and what do you want with my kids?" Chen explained their search, carefully omitting details about the poisoning attempt. Grace listened without interruption, then sighed deeply. "You're talking about Emma. Small thing, big eyes, always watching and listening. She was here for a while, on and off. Never talked much about herself, where she came from. Where is she now? Judge Harrington asked, unable to contain his urgency. Is she safe? Grace's expression softened slightly at his genuine concern. I don't know where she is now. She left the day after whatever happened at that courthouse, just packed her little backpack and said she had to go. Wouldn't tell me why, just that it wasn't safe anymore. The implications of her words hung heavy in the air. The girl, Emma, had fled because she felt threatened, because she had tried to warn a federal judge and now feared retaliation. Did she mention anything before she left? Chen pressed. Anything about what she heard or saw? Grace thought for a moment. She did say something strange, said she heard men talking in a car. Important men, she called them. Said they were planning something bad for the judge who was going to hurt their business. Judge Harrington and Chen exchanged significant looks. This confirmed their suspicions that Emma had overheard a conversation about the planned poisoning. Did she say who these men were? Judge Harrington asked. Names, descriptions, anything? Grace shook her head. Not to me, but... She hesitated. She was close with another kid here, Zach. Teenage boy, about 15. He left around the same time. I always wondered if they left together. Do you know where Zach might have gone? Chen asked. Grace's expression became guarded again. I protect my kids, detective. If I tell you where to find Zach, how do I know? You won't bring trouble to him too? Judge Harrington stepped forward, removing his cap. My name is Richard Harrington. I'm the judge Emma tried to warn. Someone poisoned me because of a case I'm presiding over, and Emma knew it was going to happen. She risked herself to try to save me, and now she's in hiding because of it. I need to find her, not just to thank her, but to protect her. The people who did this to me won't hesitate to hurt a child who could identify them. Grace studied his face for a long moment. Judge Harrington, she finally said, I've heard of you. You're the one who ruled in favor of those public housing residents last year, when the city tried to force them out. He nodded, surprised she knew of the case. I believe in justice, Mrs. Grace, for everyone. Just Grace, she corrected, then sighed. Zach sometimes stays at the youth center on Wilson Avenue, St. Catherine's. They have a program for homeless teens. If Emma's with him, that's where they'd go. They'd feel safer in the system than on the streets right now. They thanked Grace and left Lower Wacker, driving north toward Wilson Avenue. In the car, Chen's phone rang. She answered via Bluetooth. Detective Chen, where the hell are you? It was her partner, Detective Rivera. And please tell me you don't have Judge Harrington with you, because his protection detail is having a collective aneurysm right now. Chen winced. I can explain. Save it, Rivera cut her off. Whatever you're doing, wrap it up fast. The FBI's about to put out an alert and the chief is ready to have your badge. Get the judge back home now. She hung up and glanced at Judge Harrington. We're out of time. Your disappearing act has been discovered. We're close, Detective, he urged. St. Catherine's is only 10 minutes away. Chen hesitated, then made a decision. 10 minutes. That's all we've got. St. Catherine's Youth Center was a converted church, its Gothic architecture standing in stark contrast to the modern apartments surrounding it. Inside, the main hall had been divided into various spaces, a dining area, recreation room, counseling offices, and dormitories. A middle-aged woman introduced herself as Director Margaret Sullivan. We do have a Zachary who's been staying with us on and off for about 6 months, she confirmed after they explained their search. But I haven't seen him with any young girls. Could we speak with him? Chen asked. It's urgent. Director Sullivan frowned. He's not here right now. He has a part-time job at the convenience store down the block. His shift ends at 4. Wow. Judge Harrington checked his watch. It was 3:45. We'll wait. They sat in the center's lobby, Judge Harrington growing more anxious by the minute. Chen's phone kept buzzing with messages from Rivera and her superiors, which she was strategically ignoring. At precisely 4:05, a lanky teenager with shaggy dark hair and wary eyes walked through the front door. Director Sullivan waved him over. Zach, these people would like to talk to you. They're looking for your friend, Emma. Zach's entire demeanor changed at the mention of Emma. His posture stiffened and his eyes darted toward the exit. Don't know any Emma, he said, starting to back away. Chen stepped forward, keeping her voice gentle. Zach, Emma's not in trouble. We're trying to help. Her? She may be in danger. Why should I trust you? He challenged. You're cops. I am, Chen admitted. He's not. She gestured to Judge Harrington. He's the judge Emma warned about the poisoning. Zach's eyes widened in recognition. You're him? The one they were gonna poison? Judge Harrington nodded. Emma saved my life, Zach. Now I want to make sure she's safe. Something in his tone must have convinced the boy, because after a moment's hesitation, he said, She made me promise not to tell anyone where she is. She's in danger, Judge Harrington pressed. The people who poisoned me, they know she might have overheard them. They'll be looking for her. Zach's expression grew conflicted. She's been staying at my aunt's place in Evanston. My aunt works nights, so she doesn't know. I've been bringing Emma food and stuff. Can you take us there? Chen asked. Zach hesitated again, then nodded reluctantly. But just you two. No other cops. Agreed, Judge Harrington said immediately, ignoring Chen's cautious glance. But we need to hurry. As they left St. Catherine's with Zach, Chen's phone rang again. This time she couldn't ignore it. Detective Chen. Sophia, Rivera's voice was deadly serious now. We have a situation. Someone broke into Judge Harrington's chambers at the courthouse last night. They tore the place apart looking... There was something. What? Chen's alarm was evident. Was anything taken? That's just it. We don't know, but there's more. A courthouse janitor reported seeing someone asking questions about the little girl who warned the judge. This wasn't just an assassination attempt anymore. Someone's trying to clean up loose ends. Chen locked eyes with Judge Harrington, who had heard the conversation over the Bluetooth speaker. They're looking for Emma, he said, his voice tight with concern. We need to find her now. Zach, who had also overheard, looked terrified. We have to hurry. Emma's alone at my aunt's apartment. What if they find her before we do? The race to Evanston had begun, but they weren't the only ones searching for the girl who knew too much. Somewhere in Chicago, the men Emma had overheard, the men who had ordered the poisoning of Judge Richard Harrington, were also closing in on her location. The question now was, who would reach her first? The drive to Evanston was tense, with Detective Chen pushing the speed limit, while Zach directed them from the back seat. Judge Harrington's phone had been ringing non-stop. Calls from Elizabeth, the FBI detail, and the chief judge, all of which he ignored. Finding Emma had become his singular focus. It's that building. Zach pointed to a modest 3-story apartment complex on a quiet residential street. Third floor, apartment 307. Chen parked haphazardly, and they rushed inside, taking the stairs instead of waiting for the elevator. When they reached the third-floor landing, Judge Harrington noticed Zach's hesitation. What is it? He asked. Something's wrong, Zach whispered. The door, it's open a crack. I always make sure it's locked when I leave. Chen immediately pushed both Zach and the judge behind her, drawing her service weapon. Stay here, she ordered, approaching the apartment cautiously. She pushed the door open with her foot, gun raised. Police! Anyone inside? Make yourself known? Silence greeted her. After a tense moment, she entered, clearing each room methodically. Judge Harrington and Zach waited in agonizing suspense until Chen reappeared in the doorway. It's clear, she said, but someone's been here, recently. They entered the apartment, which was in disarray, drawers pulled out, cushions overturned, belongings scattered across the floor. Emma! Zach called out, panic rising in his voice as he searched the small apartment. Emma, are you here? There was no response. Judge Harrington noticed a small, worn backpack partially hidden under the couch. Is this hers? He asked, pointing, without touching it. Zach nodded, tears forming in his eyes. She never goes anywhere without that. She wouldn't leave it behind. Chen was examining the apartment with a professional eye. No signs of a struggle, she noted, but someone was definitely searching for something. She picked up a framed photo that had been knocked to the floor, a younger Zach with a woman who resembled him, presumably his aunt. Zach, do you have any idea where Emma might have gone if she felt threatened? Any place she mentioned feeling safe? The boy thought for a moment. She liked the library, the one on Chicago Avenue. She said it was quiet there, and no one bothered. Her if she just sat and read all day. It was a long shot, but it was all they had. They left the apartment with Chen calling in the break-in and requesting officers to process the scene. As they hurried back to the car, Judge Harrington noticed a black SUV with tinted windows parked across the street, its engine running. "Detective," he said quietly, nodding toward the vehicle. Chen followed his gaze and immediately placed her hand on her weapon. "Get in the car now." They quickly climbed into Chen's unmarked police car. As they pulled away, the SUV started moving too, following at a distance. "We're being tailed," Chen said, checking the rearview mirror. "I'm going to try to lose them before we head to the library." She made a series of quick turns, driving evasively through Evanston's streets. The SUV stayed with them, maintaining its distance, but clearly following their movements. "Who are they?" Zach asked, his voice trembling as he ducked down in the back seat. "Probably the same people who broke into the apartment," Judge Harrington replied grimly. "The people looking for Emma." Chen made a sudden decision, reaching for her radio. "This is Detective Chen, badge number 8219. I have Judge Richard Harrington with me, and we're being followed by a black SUV, license plate unknown, requesting immediate backup at our location." She gave their coordinates and continued her evasive driving. Within minutes, the wail of sirens could be heard, and 2 patrol cars appeared intercepting the SUV. Chen didn't slow down. "That'll keep them busy. Let's find Emma." The Evanston Public Library on Chicago Avenue was a modern building with large windows and an open floor plan. They entered as casually as possible, with Chen tucking her badge into her pocket to avoid drawing attention. "Split up," she suggested. "Cover more ground. Zach, you know her best. Where would she go in here?" "The children's section," he said without hesitation. "Or maybe the quiet reading room on the second floor. Those were her favorites." They separated, with Zach heading to the children's section, Chen taking the main floor, and Judge Harrington climbing the stairs to the second floor. The quiet reading room was a peaceful space, with comfortable chairs arranged around the perimeter, and several study tables in the center. Large windows offered views of the tree-lined street below. Judge Harrington scanned the room, his eyes moving from person to person. An elderly man reading a newspaper, a college student with headphones typing on a laptop, a middle-aged woman browsing through a magazine. No sign of a small girl. He was about to leave when something caught his eye, a flash of movement behind one of the tall bookshelves in the corner. He approached slowly, careful not to appear threatening. Peering around the shelf, he found himself looking into the wary eyes of a child huddled on the floor with a book open in her lap. Emma. She recognized him immediately, her eyes widening in surprise and fear. Before she could run, Judge Harrington crouched down to her level. "Hello, Emma," he said softly. "My name is Richard Harrington. I believe you tried to warn me outside the courthouse last week." She nodded slightly, but remained tense, ready to flee. "Are you okay?" he asked. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head. "They came looking for me," she whispered. "At the apartment." "I know. We just came from there. Zach is here too, and a detective who's helping us." Emma's expression brightened at the mention of Zach. "He's here? Now?" "Yes. He's very worried about you. We all are." Judge Harrington hesitated, then continued. "Emma, I need to ask you something important. How did you know? How did you know someone was going to poison me?" Emma looked down at her book, then back up at him. "I heard them talking. In the parking garage by the courthouse. I sleep there sometimes when it rains." "Who was talking, Emma? Can you describe them?" She nodded slowly. "There were 3 men. One was tall with gray hair. He wore expensive clothes and talked like he was the boss. Another one was younger with glasses. He kept saying it was too risky. The 3rd man didn't talk much, but he had a tattoo on his hand, a snake or something." Judge Harrington felt a chill run through him. The description of the 1st man matched Jonathan Sterling perfectly. "What exactly did they say, Emma? Can you remember?" She closed her book, her small face scrunched in concentration. The gray-haired man said, "Harrington can't be bought or scared off. We need a more permanent solution." The one with glasses said something about making it look natural, and the gray-haired man said, "There's nothing natural about what we're doing, but there's too much at stake." She paused, then added, Then they talked about something called organophos something. That wouldn't be detected right away. They said it would be put in your hand stuff. Hand sanitizer, Judge Harrington confirmed, impressed by her detailed recall. That's exactly what happened. Emma nodded. After they left, I tried to find you. I know what judges look like because I used to go to court with my mum sometimes before. She trailed off, her expression clouding. Judge Harrington didn't press for details about her past. Instead, he said, "You saved my life, Emma. You were incredibly brave to try to warn me, and I'm sorry I didn't listen." She shrugged, attempting nonchalance despite the gravity of the situation. Nobody ever listens to kids like me. The simple truth of her statement hit Judge Harrington hard. He was about to respond when Detective Chen and Zach appeared at the end of the aisle. "Emma!" Zach exclaimed, rushing forward. Emma jumped up and ran to him, throwing her arms around his waist. Chen approached more cautiously, crouching down to Emma's level after she and Zach separated. "Hi, Emma. I'm Detective Chen. You're not in any trouble, but we need to get you somewhere safe. The people who hurt Judge Harrington, they're looking for you." Emma nodded solemnly. "I know. They came to the apartment. I hid in the closet until they left. Then I came here." "Smart girl," Chen said with genuine admiration. "Now, I need you to be brave a little longer. We need to get you to the police. A station where you can tell us everything you know and we can make sure you're protected." Emma looked uncertain, glancing at Zach. "Will Zach come too?" "Of course, Judge," Harrington assured her. "And I'll be there the whole time. You have my word." Something in his tone seemed to reassure her, and she nodded her agreement. As they prepared to leave, Chen's phone rang. It was Rivera. "We've got a problem," he said, without preamble. "The black SUV that was tailing you. It's registered to North Star Pharmaceuticals, and there's more. We executed a search warrant on the company's server farms based on Judge Harrington's poisoning. We found emails between Jonathan Sterling and someone inside the courthouse discussing the judge's schedule and routines." "Do you have a name?" Chen asked urgently. "Not yet. The emails used coded language and burner accounts. But we know it's someone with access to the restricted areas of the courthouse." Judge Harrington, who could hear the conversation, felt his blood run cold. Someone inside the courthouse, someone he worked with, perhaps even trusted, had been complicit in the attempt on his life. "We need to move," Chen said, ending the call. "Rivera's sending officers to escort us back to Chicago." They made their way toward the library exit, Chen in front, Judge Harrington and the children following closely behind. As they approached the main doors, Chen suddenly stopped, her hand moving to her weapon. "Back up," she ordered quietly. "Now." Through the glass doors, they could see two men in suits standing near Chen's car. One matched the description Emma had given, tall with grey hair, Jonathan Sterling. "Is that him?" Judge Harrington asked Emma in a whisper. She nodded, shrinking back against Zach. "There's a back exit," Zach offered, "through the staff area. I know where it is." Chen nodded. "Lead the way. Quietly." They followed Zach through the library, past the puzzled looks of staff members, and through a door marked Employees Only. The service corridor led to a loading dock at the rear of the building. Chen checked that the coast was clear before ushering them outside. "My backup should be here any minute," she said, scanning the surrounding area. "We just need to stay out of sight until then." But as they moved toward the edge of the loading dock, a voice called out from behind them. "Judge Harrington, what a surprise finding you here." They turned to see Jonathan Sterling standing at the corner of the building, flanked by a younger man wearing glasses. Neither appeared to be armed, but their presence was menacing nonetheless. Chen drew her weapon. "Police! Don't move!" Sterling raised his hand slightly, a mocking smile on his face. "Detective, there's no need for that. The judge and I are simply having an unexpected meeting. Isn't that right, Richard?" Judge Harrington positioned himself in front of the children. "It's over, Sterling. We know everything. The poisoning, the break-in at the apartment, all of it. The FBI has your emails." For the first time, Sterling's confident demeanor faltered. "What emails?" "The ones discussing my schedule with your inside person at the SEI. Courthouse, Judge Harrington bluffed, watching Sterling's reaction carefully. Right now they're identifying everyone involved. It's just a matter of time. Sterling's eyes darted to the man beside him, then back to the judge. You have nothing, he said, but his voice lacked conviction. Just the ramblings of a homeless child. No one will believe her over me. I believe her, Judge Harrington said firmly, and so will a jury when they hear how precisely she recounted your conversation in the parking garage, down to the organophosphate compound you chose for the poisoning. The sound of approaching sirens cut through the tension. Sterling's face hardened. This isn't over, Harrington. Actually, Sterling, Chen said, it is. Police cars swarmed the area, officers jumping out with weapons drawn. Rivera emerged from the lead car, approaching with purposeful strides. Jonathan Sterling, he announced, you're under arrest for the attempted murder of a federal judge. As Sterling and his associate were handcuffed and led away, Judge Harrington turned to Emma, who had watched the entire scene with wide, solemn eyes. You did it, he told her softly. You brought them to justice. For the first time since they'd found her, Emma smiled, a small tentative smile that nevertheless transformed her face. No one ever believes kids like me, she repeated, but this time there was a note of wonder in her voice. But you did. Judge Harrington nodded, a lump forming in his throat. Yes, he said, I finally listened. As they walked toward the waiting police cars, the judge knew that nothing would ever be the same. Not his career, not his perspective, and certainly not his understanding of justice. Sometimes, he realized, the truth came from the most unexpected sources. And sometimes the most important thing a powerful person could do was simply to listen. 3 months later, the Chicago Federal Courthouse was bustling with its usual activity. Attorneys hurried. Through security checkpoints, clerks carried stacks of files between offices, and tourists occasionally wandered in, curious about the imposing building where justice was administered. But something had changed in the atmosphere of the place, subtle yet undeniable. In courtroom number 4, Judge Richard Harrington presided over a routine hearing with his characteristic precision and authority. To most observers, he appeared unchanged by the events of the summer, perhaps a bit thinner with a few more lines around his eyes, but still the same formidable presence on the bench. Those who knew him well, however, noticed the differences. He listened more carefully now, especially to witnesses others might dismiss. He asked more questions. And sometimes, when a particularly vulnerable person took the stand, there was a gentleness in his manner that hadn't been there before. The North Star Pharmaceuticals case had concluded with a decisive ruling against the company. Jonathan Sterling and 2 other executives were awaiting trial on multiple charges, including attempted murder, conspiracy, and corporate fraud. The inside man at the courthouse had been identified as a clerk in the records department who'd been feeding information to Sterling for months. The scandal had rocked Chicago's legal community and had made national headlines for weeks. For Judge Harrington, however, the most significant outcome hadn't been the high-profile conviction or the professional vindication. It had been a quiet, transformative project that few people knew about. In his chambers after the day's proceedings, he reviewed a set of documents with Melissa, his trusted clerk. The paperwork for the trust is finalized, she informed him. The funding is secure, and the board of directors has approved all your recommendations. Judge Harrington nodded, satisfaction evident in his expression. And the first initiative launches next week. The listening project will place trained advocates in every courthouse in Cook County, specifically to engage with at-risk children and youth. They'll have direct lines to judicial chambers and law enforcement when credible concerns are raised. And Emma's scholarship. All arranged. When she's ready for college, everything will be covered. In the meantime, her new foster family is working closely with the educational specialists to help her catch up on the schooling she missed. Judge Harrington leaned back in his chair, allowing himself a rare moment of contentment. The Emma Witness Protection Trust, named in honor of the girl who had saved his life, had become his passion project. Using his connections and a significant portion of his own savings, he had created an organization dedicated to protecting and amplifying the voices of children living on the margins of society. Elizabeth had fully supported the endeavor, even taking a sabbatical from her university position to help establish the program's educational components. There was a knock at the door, and Patricia, his administrative assistant, entered. "Your 4 o'clock is here, Your Honor." Judge Harrington straightened his robe. "Send them in." The door opened wider to admit Detective Chen, looking professional in a pantsuit rather than her usual field attire. Behind her came a social worker named Andrea Lewis, and then, somewhat shyly, Emma herself. The transformation in the child was remarkable. 3 months of regular meals, proper care, and a stable environment had filled out her once gaunt face. Her hair, now clean and neatly trimmed, framed a face that was beginning to lose its wary, haunted look. She wore a simple but new outfit, jeans, sneakers, and a blue sweater, and carried a backpack that wasn't falling apart at the seams. "Emma," Judge Harrington said warmly, rising from his seat. "Thank you for coming to see me." She smiled tentatively. "Hi, Judge Harrington. How are you settling in with the Millers?" he asked, referring to her foster family. "It's good," she said with a slight shrug. "They're nice. They don't make me talk if I don't want to, but they listen when I do." "That's very important," he agreed, noting the significance of her observation. "And school?" "Hard," she admitted. "I missed a lot, but Miss Miller helps me every night and I'm catching up." Detective Chen placed a gentle hand on Emma's shoulder. "Emma's doing incredibly well considering everything she's been through. Her testimony at the grand jury was crucial in securing the indictments against Sterling and his accomplices." "I wasn't scared," Emma declared, though the slight tremble in her voice suggested otherwise. "Judge Martinez was nice, like you. He said I was the most important witness in the whole case." "He was absolutely right," Judge Harrington confirmed. "Without you, Sterling might never have been caught. Many people owe you their gratitude, including me." Emma looked down, unused to praise. "I just did what anyone would do." "No, Judge," Harrington said firmly. "You did what very few people would have the courage to do. You saw injustice and you spoke up, even when no one wanted to listen." Andrea, the social worker, checked her watch. "We should probably head out soon." "Emma has a therapy session at 5:30. Judge Harrington nodded. "Of course. But before you go, Emma, I wanted to show you something." He stood and gestured for them to follow him. They exited his chambers and walked down the corridor to a section of the building that had recently been renovated. A new wing, previously unused administrative space, had been transformed. Above the entrance, a sign read, "The Listening Center, a safe space for young voices." "This is the first of many," Judge Harrington explained as they entered. The space was thoughtfully designed to be welcoming to children and teenagers, comfortable seating, warm colors, and areas for both privacy and group interaction. Trained staff, including social workers, child advocates, and legal advisors, would be available to any young person who needed help navigating the often intimidating legal system. "What do you think?" he asked Emma. She walked slowly through the space, taking everything in with her observant eyes. "It's nice," she said finally. "Kids will feel safe here." "That's the idea," he agreed. "And there's one more thing I wanted to show you." He led them to the main wall of the center, where a ceramic mosaic had been installed. It depicted children of various ages, backgrounds, and circumstances, their faces turned upward as if speaking. Their words, represented by colorful swirls, flowed toward a central figure, an adult, bent slightly forward in a listening posture. Beneath the mosaic was a simple plaque. "Sometimes the truth speaks when no one is listening. This center is dedicated to those who had the courage to make us hear." Emma stared at the mosaic, then at Judge Harrington. "It's like what you said that day at the library," she murmured, "that I made you listen." "You did," he confirmed. "And now, this place will ensure that other children like you will always have someone who listens." As they prepared to leave, Emma hesitated, then reached into her backpack. She pulled out a small, somewhat clumsily wrapped package. "I made this for you," she said, offering it to the judge. "In art therapy." Judge Harrington carefully unwrapped it to reveal a small clay figure, a girl with her arms outstretched as if calling out. It was simple but expressive, capturing a moment of urgency and determination. "It's beautiful, Emma, thank you." She smiled more confidently now. "Miss Miller says I might be good at art if I keep practicing. Maybe I could make more things for the center someday." "I would be honored," he told her sincerely. After Emma left with her social worker and Detective Chen, Judge Harrington returned to his chambers, placing the clay figure carefully on his desk. It would serve as a daily reminder of what he had almost lost and what he had gained, because of a child who had been brave enough to speak up. Later that evening, as he and Elizabeth prepared dinner in their kitchen, he recounted Emma's visit. "She's doing remarkably well, considering everything," he told his wife. "The Millers seem to be providing exactly the stability she needs." Elizabeth smiled as she chopped vegetables for their salad. "I spoke with Diane Miller yesterday. She says Emma still has nightmares sometimes, but they're becoming less frequent. And she's starting to open up about her past, her mother's struggle with addiction, the years spent bouncing between relatives and the streets. She deserves so much better than the hand she was dealt," Judge Harrington said, a note of anger creeping into his voice. "So many children do." Elizabeth touched his arm gently. "That's why what you're doing is so important, Richard. The listening center, the trust, they won't solve everything, but they'll help ensure that fewer children fall through the cracks." He nodded, his expression thoughtful. "You know, throughout my career, I've prided myself on being objective, on following the letter of the law. I never realized how much I was missing, how many voices weren't being heard because they didn't fit neatly into legal categories or court procedures. You're listening now," Elizabeth reminded him. "And you're helping others listen too." The following Monday, Judge Harrington arrived at the courthouse earlier than usual. He had a meeting scheduled with the chief judge to discuss expanding the Listening Center initiative to other courthouses in the district. As he walked up the steps to the entrance, he noticed a small group of children on a school field trip, listening attentively as their teacher explained the role of the federal courts. He paused, watching them for a moment. One of the children, a serious-looking boy of about 10, noticed him and nudged his classmate. "That's him," the boy whispered, loudly. "That's the judge who started the program for kids." Judge Harrington smiled and nodded to the children before continuing into the building. Inside, he passed the now completed listening center. It was already active, with trained staff preparing for the day. Through the glass doors, he could see a teenager speaking with one of the advocates, gesturing animatedly as the adult listened with focused attention. The sight filled him with a sense of purpose. In his chambers, he found a letter waiting on his desk. It was from Judge Martinez, who had presided over Emma's testimony at the grand jury. "Your Listening Center initiative is causing quite a stir in judicial circles," Martinez had written. "Some are calling it unnecessary sentimentality, but many of us see it for what it truly is, a long overdue recognition that justice must serve everyone, including those too young or too marginalized to navigate the system on their own. Count me among your supporters." Judge Harrington placed the letter in his desk drawer, alongside other messages of support that had arrived in recent weeks. Then he turned his attention to the day's docket. His first case involved a dispute between a local community organization and a development company. As he reviewed the briefs, he found himself paying particular attention to the community impact statements, voices that, in the past, he might have considered secondary to the technical legal arguments. Now he saw them as essential to understanding the full context of the case. When he entered the courtroom an hour later, he carried with him not just his legal knowledge and judicial authority, but also a new awareness, one that had been awakened by a child who had dared to shout a warning when everyone else remained silent. As he took his seat at the bench, he glanced briefly at the small clay figure he had brought from his chambers and placed discreetly beside his papers. It served as a reminder of why he was there, not merely to interpret the law, but to ensure that justice was accessible to all, especially those whose voices were so often ignored. "All rise," called the bailiff. "The United States District Court for the Northern District of Illinois is now in session. The Honorable Judge Richard Harrington presiding." He looked out at the crowded courtroom, his gaze taking in each face, the powerful and the powerless, the eloquent and the inarticulate.